a ghost that hath come from the earth, or a phantom of night that hath no home, or one that lieth dead in the desert, or a ghost unburied, or a demon, or a ghoul. Whatever thou be, until thou art removed, thou shalt find here no water to drink. Thou shalt not stretch forth thy hand to our own. Into our house enter thou not. Through our fence break through thou not. We are protected, though we may be frightened. Our life you may not steal, though we may be scared to death.
Welcome to Scared to Death, Creeps, Peepers, Roberts, and Annabelles. My voice feels back. I'm Dan.
You're back.
Yeah, it's like 90%. I feel like if I push too hard, I would get weak, but close.
Okay, well.
Every day a little more.
Okay, well, hi, Dan. I'm Lindsay.
Hello, Lindsay.
Hello.
Real quick, in honor of Mother's Day, we have a bunch of new cool stuff in the badmagicmerch.com store.
I thought you were about to say, like, you got me something so great.
And we celebrate Mommy's Day for you, and we're very excited for that.
I just thought you were going to announce some really cool present. I got
You're the best
way
mommy
too excited.
Ever. No, but in our store, we have Little Creeps and Peepers onesies for babies.
Stop it.
Scared to Death shirts and sundresses. For mamas, we have sundresses now.
Come on.
Some real cool designs, very different from anything we've done before at badmagicmerch.com.
Yeah, we're trying to branch out a little bit.
That's right. And also at badmagicmerch.com, we have tickets for sale for a new live Is We Dumb show. It's going to be the first. We did our first Scared to Death show. Mm-hmm. We're doing our first Is We Dumb, me and Joe Paisley, June 10th. Loopedlive.com. If you only listen to this show, you can see a very, very different side of our producer and a very different side of me.
Very, like literally a night and day difference.
We really let it loose. It's all comedy. I would recommend listening to one of the regular shows, and if that's too much for you, the live show will be way too much for you. It's going to be extremely explicit.
Yeah, I was just about to say, and like, not kid friendly.
Oh my God!
Not in the least bit.
Well, unless you let your kids roll with whatever kind of joking that you let adults roll with.
Yes, but
then let her rip.
Oh my God! Like a little 4-year-old in there.
He's gonna learn. Oh, 4-year-old's gonna learn some shit.
I was just thinking about that age because that's like the repeat age where they repeat. They repeat everything they
Get
hear.
ready for some talks from your preschool, from CPS possibly. Badmagicmerch.com is where those tickets are. And then one more announcement. The most important.
What you got?
This May, we here at Bad Magic Productions donating $13,800 to the Ocular Melanoma Foundation in honor of Alex Roach, a time sucker who was taken from his family at the tender age of only 33. His widow, a fan of the shows we do here, Carmen, asked us to donate in honor of her, quote, strong, talented, and amazing husband. She is amazing and strong and talented as well. That's what we're doing. It's also Melanoma Awareness Month. The Ocular Melanoma Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit, one of the leading research and patient support organizations focused on ocular melanoma eye cancer. To find out more, go to ocularmelanoma.org. Thank you so much to all of our Roberts and Annabelles on Patreon for making this possible and allowing us to make such a difference.
That was a tough one. Whew, okay.
Yeah, and I know because you were emailing back and forth with her. Yeah, it's heavy.
Yeah, it's really heavy.
Very heavy.
They have a little boy. And it's just, 33, right? That's so young.
So young.
He got, it's a very rare kind of cancer. He got it and then it spread to his brain and his spine. It took him and he fought tooth and nail. But, sometimes you just can't. And so we've been sitting on this for a while. This happened several months ago and Carmen and I were going back and forth about the appropriate time and we decided this would be such a great month since it's Melanoma Awareness Month.
Yeah.
So just sending a lot of love her way. I don't even know if she listens to this particular Bad Magic show, but man, it has rocked me.
Yeah. Interesting episode to make that announcement on, because I think this is the episode that it definitely is for me, proves more than anything else that I've done that there is life on the other side. That we go on in some form. The second story I'm going to tell today is ridiculous.
Okay.
Very intense, more spooky than scary, and also just weirdly hopeful for me, someone who wants to find proof of that there is something that goes on. I don't know how else you explain what happened other than a spirit came back. And indefinitely one spirit, someone's spirit, not just a random spirit, who gave very specific information from the other side to help solve her own murder.
Ooh, that is an interesting twist.
It is very interesting. It was written up in the papers in the late 70s across the country. It kind of caught the nation by storm, just this story for a little while. And then, of course, it's been many years and it's faded now.
Right.
I had never heard of it, but wow.
Okay.
So that's one of my stories today. How many stories do you have today?
I have two.
Okay.
I have a maybe sleep paralysis, but then
Yeah.
at the end of the story, there's a specific detail that comes out that you're like, wait, was that sleep paralysis? Or did this person actually see something? I'll get into it when we talk about it, but it was very interesting to me. And then for our first story, we're going to Colombia, and it's a funky little story that has a few twists and turns of like, is this culty? Is this witchy? Like, what is happening here?
Interesting.
It's a cool story. Yeah, I'm excited about it.
We're going to have a really unique, I think, tone to today's show. I am into it. Very much unsolved mysteries type vibe.
Dun, 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 dun.
Did you ever watch the original Unsolved Mysteries?
Oh, I couldn't handle it.
Oh, it was one of my favorite shows growing up.
That is, but like creep,
Yeah.
peeper.
Yeah.
That's it right there. Because, that music would come on and I'd be like, oh God,
Yep.
oh no. I would leave the room. I was so panicked
wow.
by it. I couldn't.
think his name was Robert Stack.
I
Joe,
can picture
correct
him.
me if I'm wrong, but older guy, was acted in a lot of stuff when he was younger, and I just love when he'd walk out with all the fog, just that very distinctive voice. Tonight on Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh, it chills down my spine. I don't
August
like it.
5th, 1984. A woman and her son are lost in the forest.
I got it.
Oh, so
'Cause,
good.
I don't deal well with the unknown. Like we talk about it even in our sponsor ads when
Yeah.
I'm talking about BetterHelp and whatnot. Like I'm somebody who needs tangibles.
Yeah.
I'm always spiraling out about like, what if it is.
A woman from Cleveland. She lives in Coeur d'Alene, is walking alone in the forest.
Shut the fuck up.
Like socks.
She likes socks and fluffy things.
Okay, guys.
A spaceship comes
Stop
from
it!
across the forest. She can't defend herself.
Stop it!
Alien from Sock Planet. Looking for socks.
At least Joe's was funny. Yours was just mean.
Oh, boy.
Oh boy. Oh
Okay.
boy. Okay. Well, I'm excited to talk about the spirit thing because in
Yes.
my mind, I just want to put this question out there because I'm afraid I'll forget it. I'm curious how exactly that story comes together because
It's intense.
I wonder if when you die, if your spirit can inhibit. I always think like you die and then like you come back as a new, like a baby, but can that spirit like inhibit
Inhabit? Yeah. Yeah.
someone? What is inhibit? Oh, to stop, to
Yeah.
to inhabit someone who's already here. Do you know what
Yeah, I don't want to give anything away, but you're going to find out.
I'm gonna make a note
your
right now.
question will be answered shortly.
I'm going to make a note.
So the two stories I found, they both come from old episodes of Unsolved Mysteries. And this is rare for us. They both also involve true crime. The first one might be paranormal, definitely very, very creepy. A story about a woman being terrorized by something or someone for 7 years.
That's a long ass time.
Oh my God. Threatening phone calls, attacks, broken windows, break-ins, so much more, and eventually a disturbing death. The second one certainly involves the paranormal. The first one might. And again, the best paranormal evidence I've come across. A woman who seems to have definitely solved her own murder from beyond the grave.
Okay.
Don't normally include trigger warnings, but this first story, there are some pretty graphic sexual true crime details.
Okay.
So if you need to skip it, I only include this warning because this particular story is not the kind we normally tell here on Scared to Death.
Is it just in the setup?
No, it's kind of like midway through the story.
Okay,
so it's
okay.
hard
So there's
to,
no way to just like skip ahead a minute or so.
Yeah,
You should just maybe skip the story.
You'll know. I can give you a heads up. I won't if I forget to say the word like trigger or whatever. But it's the first time I believe first or second time I can't remember this woman's attacked.
Okay. Well, I think a
yeah.
warning at the top, and you guys make your decisions. I don't want
Exactly.
you to ruin the flow of the show
Exactly.
and pull us out of the story. Okay.
I decided to include this tale in our collection of primarily ghost tales because it's just so odd and disturbing. Mm-hmm. Enough so that it made me wonder: could some element of the paranormal be at play here? If so, what kind of element would it be? Mm-hmm. Also decided to pick this story because this story and the next story were unsettling enough that when one of the Unsolved Mysteries original series co-creators, Terry Dunn-Muir, was asked to name the 10 creepiest stories she had ever been a part of telling out of roughly 1,300 stories she helped produce over the years, these two stories were amongst those 10.
Wow. Okay.
And this first story was actually called on the show Scared to Death, so we had to tell it here.
I mean, obviously,
You were
it was
destined
calling
to.
for us.
Little bit of setup now, and then we're gonna get into it.
Okay, I've got my fuzzy socks.
Okay.
I ordered a decaf this morning, and I think they gave me regular, so I'm like a little.
You're not
whoo-hoo.
too ding.
I'm trying really hard, and my hands are shaky. It makes me not feel well.
Okay.
Anyways, skull and crossbones. Whoop 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 whoop.
All right, you ready?
I'm ready, Dan. Let's do it.
Cynthia Cindy Elizabeth Hack James, long name, but she kind of changed her names over the years, was born on June 12th, 1944, in the little, roughly 5,000 person town of Oliver, British Columbia. Not far from where we are, actually, not far from the U.S. border with Washington State. And no one could have predicted how strange the final chapter of her life would be. The eldest of 6 children, she grew up a normal kid in a normal family, no trouble in school, no trouble at home, and then she made the practical decision to study nursing after she finished high school, and she moved to Vancouver, a 400-kilometer, 5-hour drive, to the west to the big city. There, when she was just 19, she quickly met and then married a psychiatrist named Roy Makepeace in 1965.
Perfect last name.
Perfect last name. Don't know if he was born with that or not, but it's on his obituary. A man nearly twice her age at 37 at the time.
Okay.
The two fell madly in love, and the year after getting married, Cindy graduated from nursing school in 1966, later became the administrator for a preschool with children with behavioral and emotional issues where she'd worked for many years. She would have no children of her own. Those children would be her kids. She seemed happy, fulfilled. She lived in a nice home, and together, her and her husband made a more than comfortable living. The two remained married for 17 years before Cindy filed for divorce and separated from her husband in early 1982. And 4 months later, a series of very troubling incidents began that would last for 7 disturbing years. Time now for the tale of the woman who may have murdered herself. It all started with some phone calls. Someone would call Cindy and stay silent for a few moments before the line went dead. She was bothered enough by the frequency of these phone calls to tell some friends and her parents. Then, shortly after they began, a male voice would come on the line and whisper threats. Without access to the police reports, we don't know exactly what the mystery caller told her, only that they were, quote, obscene and threatening. Supposedly, the same caller started harassing her ex-husband at this time as well, and he left a voicemail on his answering machine that I listened to that just says, "Cindy, dead meat.
What?
Soon." Yep.
Fuck.
Cindy called the police for the first time on October 12th, 1982, to report these threats. And the calls continued and were frequent enough that a few officers were actually at her house when some of them came in. The officers didn't hear the male voice, but they did hear silence on the line, and they heard the caller hang up. What drew these officers to come to her house weren't these calls, but reports of a prowler on the property. The day after first reporting the calls to the police, Cindy reports a prowler for the first time on October 13th. She hears someone attempt to open the back door of the house she's been renting for the past 2.5 months. 2 days later, on the 15th, someone throws a rock through her kitchen window, shattering it. Meanwhile, the calls continue. Things escalate even further 4 days later on October 19th when Cindy reports that someone has entered her home and slashed her pillow to ribbons.
Oh my God.
She discovered this only when she turned down her bedsheets. Responding officer Pat McBride suggests that her ex-husband, Roy Makepeace, could be responsible. Cindy emphatically denies this as a possibility, as Makepeace was the one who urged her to phone the police about her pillow in the first place.
That doesn't eliminate him.
True. 2 days later, Officer McBride goes above and beyond the call of duty and installs deadbolts on Cindy's doors. He also begins visiting her daily, and within days, the relationship turns romantic.
Saw that coming.
Little over a week later, on October 30th, a threatening note now shows up, assembled from cutout letters. It's found lying on Cindy's porch. McBride now actually moves in with her, ostensibly to protect her and also because, of course, they're dating.
And it could be him.
Could be him. 2 weeks later, in mid-November, Cindy now finds a picture of a corpse, clipped from a book titled Malpractice, under the windshield of her car. Adding to how threatening this is, her phone lines are discovered as having been severed in 5 different places. And the police, not even the officer living with her, can't figure out who's responsible. On December 1st, Officer McBride moves out of her house at Cindy's request, but the two continue to date for a time, and he keeps his key to her house for a time. The following month, January 1983, the local phone company installs a tap on Cindy's phone to trace the harassing phone calls that are still coming in. Unfortunately, the calls are too brief to trace back to a specific address. All they can determine is that the calls are coming from somewhere in the Vancouver area. On January 4th, more disturbing pictures arrive in the mail. And Officer McBride finds another note made out of cutout letters on Cindy's lawn. The pictures are of corpses, knives, and women with their faces scratched out. It's extremely troubling. The letters contain menacing words and phrases like mangled, pulp, and dead. Still, no one has any idea who's responsible for this. Then 3 weeks later, on January 27th, things escalate yet again in this strange and disturbing case. Cindy is now found unconscious in her garage by a friend, Agnes Woodcock, who showed up to visit, knocking on the door and becoming concerned when Cindy didn't answer.
Oh my gosh.
Agnes walked around back and was shocked to find her friend Cindy crouched down, looking like she was trying to hide, like she was scared. Once she realized it was her friend, Cindy stood up, and that's when Agnes saw the nylon stocking tied around Cindy's neck. That's when she saw the blood and called the police.
Oh my God.
Cindy tells the police she had answered a knock at her back door and then someone had grabbed her. Someone she can't describe enough detail to lead to any suspects. A man, though. And she claims this man dragged her to the garage where a second man she also couldn't describe in any great detail was waiting. She tells the police that one of the men slashed her hand with a knife, then knotted a black stocking tightly around her neck, causing Cindy to pass out. When medical experts examine her, Cindy has over a dozen cuts made by a scalpel or some other sharp instrument on her arms and legs. Cindy will also claim vague memories, and this is the part I warned about. I'm remembering now. This is extremely upsetting, of being raped with a knife. The next month, February 1983, David Boyer Smith, a veteran officer now in charge of the investigation into her attack, believes that her ex-husband, Roy Makepeace, is responsible for everything. He becomes the prime suspect, the only suspect, for who is terrorizing his ex-wife, Cindy. Boyer Smith also believes that Cindy is withholding information, so he arranges for her to take a polygraph exam. She fails it. Twice. She confesses that she recognized one of the men who attacked her in January, but refuses to name him for fear he will go after her family. Is she lying? We know now that polygraph tests are notoriously unreliable. If she is lying, why? About what? Cindy moves out of her rented home now, moves into the former home she owns and once shared with her ex-husband, who now moves out into a different home.
Okay.
Despite Officer Boyer Smith's suspicions, she doesn't appear afraid of her ex, and the two appear to have remained friends and to have, in fact, a very amicable relationship. Cindy won't stay in her old house for long, though, moving out into a new place just a few months later after the mysterious harasser has found her again. Shortly after moving in, setting up a new phone with a new phone number, even having her car repainted to disguise it, the harassing calls return again, and she moves out just a few weeks later. Shortly after moving for the fourth time in just a year, she now visits Jakarta in Indonesia to see her brother, get out of the country for a little while. Interestingly, her ex-husband pays for the trip. Things still appear extremely amicable between the two. While she's gone, more threatening letters arrive for her, this time at Blenheim House, the preschool for behaviorally challenged children where she's worked for years. Then, much more menacing than the letters, shortly after she returns from overseas from visiting her brother, a strangled cat is found in Cindy's garden.
Oh my.
With a note attached that says, "You're next."
Ugh.
A few weeks later, someone destroys Cindy's garden. Who's doing this? Police still have no idea. The following month, November 1983, McBride finds another note on Cindy's porch, followed 4 days later by another strangled cat.
This person is a fucking psychopath.
This story's going to get so weird. McBride convinces Cindy to hire his friend, private investigator Ozzy Caban, after Cindy's phone lines are cut again. 2 months later, on January 30th, 1984, Cindy is attacked for the second time. At 6 p.m., Cindy presses a panic button her and private investigator Caban had installed in her home to alert him that she needed help immediately. He kicks in her door just 15 minutes later to find Cindy on the floor. A paring knife has been stabbed through her left hand with another threatening note underneath the hand pinned to the table.
Yeah.
A black stocking has again been knotted tightly around her neck. She'd also appeared to have been struck in the head. And maybe most disturbing of all, there's a needle mark in her right arm, but no substance is found in her system.
Oh, shit.
Cindy claims she can't remember anything about the attack.
Oh, no.
There are still no clues, no strong suspects, other than some are still wondering if her ex Makepeace is responsible for all of this.
Or McBride.
The suspicion is heightened about her ex shortly after this attack when Cindy tells the police that Makepeace threatened and even beat her when they were married and pledges to limit contact with him now. On Valentine's Day, 1984, Roy Makepeace, the psychiatrist, is brought into police headquarters, questioned for nearly 6 hours by police. Roy claims to be as baffled by the incidents as Cindy, but he does offer a new theory that Cindy's work with troubled children has invoked the anger of a local family with organized crime ties. Strange theory, yes, but with the details he gives authorities, they do actually look into it, but nothing will come of it. The following month, Cindy undergoes a third polygraph regarding all her claims, and this time she passes, further adding to the mystery of all of this. Over the summer of 1984, the harassment continues. The phone calls continue at both Cindy's home and her work. They've been going on for 2 years now. Her phone wires are cut yet again. More of her windows are broken. Cindy's now losing weight and withdrawing socially from friends and colleagues due to all the stress.
Yeah, of course.
Also that summer, Cindy calls PI Caban over to her house again, after finding her back door partially open. Inside her home, Caban finds a sexually explicit birthday note and someone else's cigarette butts.
Ugh.
He also finds Cindy's small dog, Heidi,
Oh no.
tied to the kitchen table with the same type of string used to strangle the cats, not dead but beaten to the point of bruising.
Oh my God.
Shortly after this, Cindy will find a third dead cat in her yard, strangled like the first two. On July 3rd, 8:30 p.m., another troubling incident. Cindy notifies investigator Caban that she'll be walking her dog Heidi at the local Dunbar Park. She was keeping him pretty in the loop as far as her daily activities at this point. 3.5 hours later, a frightened-looking Cindy knocks on a stranger's door and then collapses. Another black stocking knotted tightly around her neck.
Holy shit.
The third time now this has happened. The last thing she remembers is being stopped on the street by a bearded man and a blonde woman in a dark green van. The man asked her for directions. There are 2 needle marks on Cindy's arm, but no drugs in her system, at least none they can detect aside from prescribed antidepressants. Under questioning, she is confused and incoherent. Over the following few months, at her PI Caban's suggestion, Cindy undergoes hypnosis to help her recall details of her most recent abduction. Hypnotist Hal Booker is unable to recover any useful information during the first session, but in the second, she declares that she had once witnessed a double murder. She cannot or will not provide any details. I personally am not a fan of memories recovered while under hypnosis, as they've been proven incredibly unreliable over the years, but I have to include this as another interesting, weird detail in the trail of interesting, weird details the story is built out of. Where is all this heading? Law enforcement has still found no suspects, and unusually, some are beginning to think now that Cindy is somehow doing most of this herself and orchestrating the rest. By this point, all of Cindy's coworkers and supporters have been investigated, and Interpol has looked into Roy's background, her ex-husband, in addition to him being thoroughly investigated as a prime suspect by police. No charges have been filed. Police even secretly have staked out Cindy's house on numerous occasions for days at a time and found nothing pointing to who or what has been harassing Cindy. After a quiet few months, the menacing phone calls then returned by the end of the year.
Man.
Following over 6 more months of these harassing phone calls, Cindy overdoses on sleeping pills, an apparent suicide attempt, on June 21st, 1985. She's found just in time to save her by a friend, taken to the hospital where she recovers, and then she is discharged into the care of her brother. Then a week later, her phone lines are cut again. The following month, the police stake out both her home and the home of her ex-husband Roy. They observe no suspicious activity at either residence. In mid-July of 1985, Cindy reports yet another phone call to the police. However, this time the call was recorded by the phone company, and the recording indicates where the number came from: her own house.
Oh no.
Why would she do that? A new theory emerges that Cindy is behind most of what she had reported, but that she truly isn't aware of it. This theory is that she has dissociative identity disorder, known at the time as multiple personality disorder, and that one of her alternate personalities hidden from her primary personality is harassing her. Her ex-husband, the psychiatrist, is the main proponent of this theory. July 27th, Cindy now receives a cosmetic case full of rancid meat in the mail.
Ugh.
Did she send it to herself? The police will never determine where it came from or who sent it. A week later, on August 5th, Cindy reports the first of 3 arsons that summer at her home. A basement window is found open, but there are no signs of forced entry after the first fire is reported. Police are suspicious that she set the fire. Her strange saga has now been going on for 3 years. Cindy reports 2 additional basement fires over the following 2 months and receives a total of $9,500 in insurance money. On December 1st, she moves for the 5th time since all this began. This time to the Vancouver suburb of Richmond, and 10 days later, yet another attack is reported.
This is crazy.
Oh yeah. This time Cindy is found wandering around a pond near the university campus without shoes or a coat after going missing during her lunch break from work. a black stocking yet again knotted around her throat. There's a needle mark on her arm again. Incoherent and confused, she's unable to remember anything about the incident, or so she says. Detective Halliday consults psychiatrist Anthony Marcus. Marcus renders the opinion that Cindy engineered this harassment herself. Police decline to press criminal mischief charges if Cindy agrees to enter therapy, which she does not do. Instead, she continues informal sessions with an unlicensed therapist who goes by Dr. Connolly.
That's not a good idea.
For the first time since the incidents began, Cindy is surrounded by more doubters than believers now. Her parents, Cummins, and a handful of close friends remain convinced that someone else is harassing Cindy. The police no longer accept any of her reports at face value, though. After yet another fire starts on April 15th, 1986. And arson investigators determined that the fire was started inside the house and accuse Cindy of setting it. Cindy accuses her ex-husband Roy of starting the fire, unaware that he was in South Africa at the time. This does not look good for her.
Oh boy.
She's evicted from the house. Depressed and suicidal, she's given a 6-month leave of absence from work. Had she truly been behind all of this the whole time, or has someone else or something else driven her mad through years of continual and often violent harassment? Shortly after being evicted, at her therapist Connolly's advice, her brother Doug Hack commits Cindy to St. Paul's Hospital, where a police psychologist reviews Cindy's files, classes the attacks and arsons as psychotic behavior on the part of Cindy. Dr. Soon Mo and psychologist Ken Durkel reach the same conclusion. Psychiatrist Wesley Friesen believes Dr. Connolly's insistence that the harassment was real has hampered Cindy's treatment, and consider it possible that Cindy could kill herself and stage it to look like the murder, look like she was murdered by Roy Makepeace. Dr. Connolly himself concedes this is a possibility. Lots of different opinions. On July 15, 1986, Cindy is released from the psychiatric ward and enters therapy with psychiatrist Dr. Friesen. And she shows marked improvement throughout the summer. 2 months later, in September, she buys a house in Richmond, changes her last name to James to hide her identity. Her life seems to finally be moving in a more positive direction. But then 2 months later, in November, Cindy is fired from Blenheim House for poor work performance. She'd worked there since 1975.
Wow.
Cindy was devastated. She loved working with the children there. They were like her own children. The blow, though, does not break her. Her spirits soon appear to lift again. After a brief period of depression, she gets back on her feet, takes refresher courses in nursing, gets hired at Richmond General Hospital in August of 1987. Then days after she starts her new job, she reports that someone has broken a window in her new home.
Oh no.
Another window is reported broken the following month. Has her stalker found her again? Is she making it all up? After a quiet 6 months that follow, she then reports that someone has kicked in her basement door. 7 months after that, on October 26, 1988, over 6 years after all this began, she triggers another panic alarm set up by her old PI, who comes over at midnight, finds Cindy in her garage, partially nude, with a black stocking knotted around her neck, her hands and feet bound with another stocking, the fourth possible attack. She says this time she'd been grabbed from behind while getting in her car, and she can't remember what happened next. The police do not take her claims seriously and think that she has somehow done this to herself. A lot of opinions on both sides of that. Another threatening note shows up the following April. Another break-in attempt is reported that same month. Then, the next month, late May of 1989, 7 years after all this began, Cindy tells private investigator Caban that she wants to install an infrared alarm system in her backyard so that she can shoot any intruders. She also tells him that she is finally ready to talk, implying she's been withholding information for years.
The fuck does that mean?
Days later, on Friday, May 26th, she disappears. When police find her, they'll reveal the final, very strange, sad chapter in her 7-year saga. The last day she was seen alive, May 26, Cindy began a 5-day vacation from her job at Richmond General. The 44-year-old ran a few errands, including buying a birthday gift for a friend's son and getting a makeover. When her friends, the Woodstocks, came over to play bridge with her at 10 p.m., her car was still gone. They find it in the parking lot of a local Safeway the day after she disappeared. When investigators went over the vehicle, they find blood on the driver's side door. Items from her wallet are thrown about outside the car. In the trunk, they find the groceries that Cindy had bought, along with a wrapped gift she had gotten for someone. For 2 weeks, her family and friends were left to wonder where Cindy was and what was happening to her. Then the gruesome discovery of her body shocked everyone. She was found in the front yard of an abandoned house in a rather high-traffic area with lots of pedestrian foot travelers. It initially seemed that she couldn't have been killed when she was first reported missing, but after the autopsy, it showed that she had died most likely the day she disappeared. Her body showed numerous wounds, including yet another injection mark on her arm, later be determined to be a lethal dose of morphine.
Oh.
She was found with both her hands and feet tied behind her body. Around her neck, that signature black nylon, which looked like it had been used to try and strangle her. What was missing from the scene was the needle used to administer the morphine. The police concocted the notion that a lot of people didn't buy, that Cindy had injected herself elsewhere, discarded the needle, then walked 1.5 miles to the scene where she had tied her feet and hands behind her back, then tried to strangle herself.
That's literally impossible.
The official cause of death was listed as a morphine overdose. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police claimed it was suicide or possibly an accident, just the way she was tied. Some people think it was possible she could have done it. Others think it wasn't possible. The Vancouver coroner ruled both of the police's results out. The coroner ruled that Cindy's death was not suicide or an accident or a murder, claiming that she died of an unknown event. Such a strange official cause of death. The private investigator she hired years earlier believes that she had been taken and killed, and her body then dumped shortly before it was discovered. Her ex-husband, before he died years later, firmly believed that Cindy didn't kill herself exactly, but was murdered by herself. He believed that she had several distinct different personalities, and that one of them hated her. One of them wanted her to suffer and then to die. How terrifying is that possibility? I know the psychiatric and psychological jury is out as far as the extent that alternate personalities can A, exist, and B, attempt to really harm you, but what if it is possible? What if you could truly be your own worst enemy in a very special and horrific way that you couldn't consciously perceive? And since we've talked about the possibility of malevolent, manipulative spirits before so many times here on Scared to Death, what if Cindy was possessed by something? What if something was making it look like this other personality was out to get her, or that someone else was? What if someone that was attached to her, turning everyone against her, turning her against herself? Or what if there was a mysterious outside person or entity terrorizing her for 7 years? And by the end, in the final years, almost no one believed her. How awful is that? There are so many possibilities regarding the exact details that led to Cindy James' death. The one thing I know for sure is that all of them are the stuff of nightmares.
Very interesting.
What a strange story. I get why it haunted that producer.
It just doesn't make sense.
Nope. And no one will ever agree exactly what really happened.
I mean, details that I bump on are no one looked at McBride, and that seems very peculiar that in my mind, he is suspect number one, because stalkers are, you don't ever really know sometimes, that was a sentence that didn't make sense. You don't always know where they're coming from, or like who is stalking you, right? It can be, someone who notices you at a distance. It doesn't have to be, like you think about like The Bodyguard, it doesn't have to be some crazed lunatic fan. It doesn't have to be your neighbor. It doesn't have to be someone that you actually know or interact with. It can just be someone that, again, sees you one time. Like, I don't know, like what if McBride just saw her right in his work, his line of work. He may have at some point had to have somebody admitted to where she worked and saw her. Yeah. He could have been stalking her like mentally.
Effort, but yeah, but like her sister, I will say, did investigate this not that she's an investigator. Yeah. But she wrote a whole book on it, one of her sisters. It's not available in ebook, but you can get it in like hardback if you find it in the right spots. Yeah. It's no longer in print. But there's information about it. She has a website as well, blogs. She doesn't seem to think that he did it. And interestingly, she also doesn't seem to think that her ex-husband did it.
But who does she think did it?
That she really, truly doesn't know.
And what was that mob thing?
That was just like a wild theory that didn't really seem to go anywhere. But like maybe that like one of the kids that was in her facility, that their family was tied to organized crime or members of organized crime. Yeah. And something there. I mean, it's just...
I did write that down, like a disgruntled family. Yep. Or a kid that was there that then years later got out, was released.
And she definitely was mentally ill. She was stating it. But then there's that thing of like...
But was she mentally ill?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Because if you're going to... numerous psychiatrists did think that she was suffering from, some psychotic episodes.
But wouldn't you be feeling like you were having a psychotic break if this was happening to you?
I know. That's the thing.
And she lived with a psychiatrist for, they were married 17 years.
And he thought she was mentally ill.
Did he think that she was mentally ill while they were married?
I couldn't figure out that nuance. I couldn't figure out, like, did he
always feel that way?
And he wasn't the one, from everything I read, he wasn't the one who left her. She left him. And I didn't include this detail. They continued to date off and on for a while after. It just didn't seem like part of the flow of the horror story.
Right.
But they continued to date for a while after they got divorced. But she
Right.
also left him. I mean, he could have dated somebody who, I mean, people do, marry people knowing they have dissociative identity disorder.
But that would be
They
a
know
weird
that's
thing
part of
not to come forward with that.
Yeah, it would be weird not to come forward with it initially, which didn't happen. Correct.
Right.
And yeah. I mean, I know it can, generally, from what I know about dissociative identity disorder, which is not a ton, but a little, it comes from people who have been diagnosed with it. Almost always have been severely abused as children, like severely.
And you go to that other place to
no
cope.
detail. Yeah, that it starts when you're forming your identity in adolescence. That's when the personalities all fracture. So it is weird that they would be married for that many years and he wouldn't say anything about it initially.
Right,
and,
right.
And there's no mention in any of the sources about any abuse of any kind in her childhood. So it'd be very, very, very atypical for her to develop that later in life.
Yeah, and then just some of the details, like the sexual assault upon herself with a knife, that feels...
And I will say,
And
that
like-
was her claim, but that was never investigated from what I could tell by the police. She said that happened. Part of her examination, after the attack, it didn't come from that. So that's interesting too. In the police exam, she said that.
But they didn't do a rape kit, or...
No, I got the feeling that she didn't ask for one. That there was visible cuts on her arms, legs. She added that detail. It doesn't appear that detail was ever followed up on by police, which leads me to
Got
believe
it.
that she didn't want it to be followed up on.
Okay,
and then she
okay.
just said it happened.
But that's a tricky piece of the puzzle.
There's so many tricky pieces of the puzzle with this one.
But like the morphine injections, I don't know
Yeah.
a ton about morphine, but
And only the last one was the one where they found morphine in her system.
But
The
you would
previous-
think that it was...
Yeah, correct.
I mean,
correct.
you would connect those dots. You would say,
Yes.
okay, at this point, after seeing these needle marks multiple times, finally we were able to find the substance in her system. We will presume that it was always this substance. Even if she was getting high
Sure.
on heroin or whatever,
Sure.
okay? How would you get... Because in my mind, like, you would be getting... How do I want to say this? If an attacker was doing it, they're giving you the morphine so that they can do whatever they want to you without you fighting it. That is my train of thought. So is she abusing herself and then shooting herself up for the
I know.
pain?
I-
Which is weird. Or is she shooting herself up first and then supposedly attacking her own self, which wouldn't be possible.
And two of the attacks, she wasn't found hurt. The one when she was wandering in the park, the one where she on break from lunch, when she was found wandering by that university on like the campus. There was needle marks, but there was not evidence of assault with those two. So it's interesting. It's all over the map. Where like with the one, there was the crazy assault of like either she or someone else put a fucking knife through her hand.
Right, that's insane.
That's insane.
And then there was a time
well,
that
it might
she
be
was,
literally insane.
Yeah, and then there was a time that she was tied up. But I was imagining her like execution style, where it was like her hands.
There were some people that were brought in, apparently as part of the investigation into her death.
Yeah.
That were more like experts in ligature and knots and all that.
Yeah.
They seemed to think that it was possible to put yourself in that situation. Very odd, very unusual, but the way she was found.
I just like if I'm.
I know you have to be pretty flexible.
How do
It's a
you-
whole series of things.
I couldn't make a knot like to tie my own hands together.
Right.
Like I don't know why I decided it had to be up here, but like. I wish
If
I had a piece
yeah.
of string right now. I just could demonstrate that I don't think I could do that.
If it was her, she went to great lengths for many years to make it look like somebody else.
Yeah, and I also just think about it in this, my God, I'm having a hard time with words today. It wasn't like Craigslist or, these like various internet outlets were an option where you could, there are people who are in chat rooms who have different fantasies.
Sure.
Okay, they have like rape fantasy. they
Extreme
have-
bondage, BDSM stuff, yeah.
Right. So in my mind, it's not even, I don't know how, not that it didn't exist, I just don't know how you would have access to that she was having these weird things that she wanted to play out, these weird fantasies, but then was too scared and, didn't want to reveal that information, was too embarrassed, it had gone too far, or like she was paying different people to tie her up and then she was taking that information because what she really got off on was the attention from the police.
So yeah, interesting theory. I mean, there's so many possibilities. We don't know why she left her husband. I mean, there's
None
so
of it makes
many
sense.
things, and that's why it haunts that. From what I got from this one interview, why it haunts that co-creator and producer is like she's thought about it for years and still is like, what the hell happened?
Yeah. Wow. I feel like I'm going to be thinking about this for a long time. Details and Googling and reading. It's a weird story.
Few pictures before we move on.
Oh yeah, sorry. We talked a lot about that one.
that's fine.
Had a lot of questions.
This first picture is a nursing student, Cindy Hack.
She's so pretty.
She's young. Yep, very pretty. The next one is the young wife, Cindy Makepeace. And then,
Cute.
And then this is here, not long before she died, definitely looks stressed and stuff. This is Cindy James. Not a great
she's
picture.
so thin.
Yeah, she was, from all accounts, obviously, whether it's her, whether it's somebody else, this saga would wear on someone.
God, she looks really awful. Like her head looks too big for her body. When someone gets really emaciated.
And then two more. This not a great image quality, but this is one of the notes she received. The ICU, somebody holding a knife, somebody getting strangled. And then this last one is a collage of just more of threatening notes kind of put together, plus another picture of Cindy that's, it's small there, but, knife, soon, Cindy, all these kind of threats.
Yeah. The cats. Oh, the cats.
Yeah. Ah, my God.
Oh, chills all over. Something really fucking weird happened there.
Yep. Are you ready to explore something that is even weirder?
I guess this is an episode of weird things.
Okay, now for a story that I don't think is as terrifying as the first one, but in a way much more spooky.
Okay.
It's the best evidence I think I have ever heard so far that there is definitive something on the other side, like proof of something on the other side. Spirits, they can come back from the dead to speak with us. Again, another one that haunts the Unsolved Mysteries co-creator, and I think it's going to haunt you too.
Okay.
Tiny bit of setup before we dive in. You ready to go?
I'm ready.
In 1977, Teresita Basa was 47 years old, and life seemed to be going very well for her. By all accounts, she was happy. Her life was moving in a good direction. She was living in Chicago and employed at Edgewater Hospital. She'd recently gone back to school, was working on her doctoral thesis in music at Loyola University. A gifted pianist, she gave piano lessons out of her apartment on the side. She herself had once been a music student back in the Philippines where she'd grown up. The only child of a prominent and wealthy couple, she'd graduated from Assumption College in Manila, then moved to the United States, earned a master's degree in music from Indiana University before transitioning into working in the medical field and becoming a respiratory therapist. Time now for the tale of the ghost that came back to solve her own murder. Monday, February 21st, 1977, started off as a routine day for Teresita. She worked her normal day shift at the hospital, then returned to her apartment building at 2740 North Pine Grove Avenue. Around 7:30 p.m., she received a phone call from her friend Ruth Loeb, and the two of them talked for about 20 minutes before Teresita told Ruth she had to get off the phone because she was expecting company. All Ruth knew was that some man was stopping by. She didn't ask for the man's name or any other details. Not even an hour later, at 8:40, a couple who lived down the hall from Teresita, Marid and Catherine Nazi, thought that they smelled smoke. They couldn't figure out where it was coming from, placed a call to the building's janitor, who immediately called the Chicago Fire Department and started evacuating residents. By the time firefighters rushed into the building, the hallway had rapidly filled with smoke. Firefighters arrived quickly and determined that the source of the smoke, or put the fire out quickly, and determined the source of the smoke was apartment 15B where Teresita lived. Now they broke down her door, put the flames out in minutes, and found her lifeless body. Laying on the floor under a mattress and covered in blood was the still warm corpse of Teresita. She was naked, had a kitchen knife planted deeply into the center of her chest.
Jesus.
Detectives were called to the scene, quickly determined that whoever had killed her had lit the blaze in order to destroy any evidence of their crime. Then, after killing her, they'd thrown a pile of clothing on top of her, lit it on fire, then thrown on the mattress to burn it as well.
Jeez.
Since Teresita had been nude when she'd been set on fire, detectives first assumed that she had likely been raped before she'd been killed. But then the autopsy showed no signs of sexual assault. It appeared that she had been robbed, though. Maybe. Her apartment had clearly been ransacked, and it was clear that a struggle had taken place, but detectives couldn't figure out what, if anything, had been taken. They combed through the apartment looking for any clues that might lead them to their killer, but it appeared the murderer left no physical evidence behind. One of the few things detectives did take as evidence was a memo that Teresita had apparently written to herself, reminding her to, quote, get theater tickets for AS, Investigators had no idea who AS might be, nor how recently Teresita had written the notes, but they were very obviously interested in locating this mystery person. And they would be led to this person, but they would have never guessed in a million years how. Homicide detectives spent the next several weeks interviewing Teresita's friends, co-workers, neighbors, and classmates. They all spoke highly of Teresita. The general consensus was that she was quiet and polite, someone who was very dedicated to her job and highly regarded by her patients. Although she occasionally dated, no one knew of anyone specific she was seeing. She'd never married, and if she had a rich romantic life, she didn't talk about it much. She seemed focused on her work at the hospital and teaching and studying music. No one could figure out who could possibly want to kill her. She didn't seem to have any enemies. Everyone who knew her seemed genuinely shocked at the thought that someone could have possibly wanted her dead. During the course of the investigation, detectives learned a lot about Teresita, and none of it led them any closer to her killer. They made several public pleas for assistance. No tips flowed in that led to any solid leads. Her case quickly went cold, or rather stayed cold. They'd never had any suspects. Then 5 months after Teresita was murdered, in July of 1977, Detective Joe Stachula arrived at work one morning to find a note on his desk asking him to call the Evanston Police Department about the Basa murder. An Evanston officer soon told him they'd just received a call from someone claiming to have info about the murder, one Dr. Jose Chua, a doctor who lived in Skokie, a Chicago suburb. And when Detective Stachula and his partner, Detective Lee Eplin, interviewed the doctor at his home, their minds would be blown with the details he would tell them. After a few minutes of small talk, Dr. Chua, a medical doctor, not a witch doctor, timidly asked the men if they believed in the occult, in the paranormal. While the detectives later admitted thinking at this point they were completely wasting their time, they played along and said that they did. Then Dr. Chua, who went by Joe, proceeded to tell them that he believed that his wife, Remy, had been possessed by the spirit of Teresita Basa.
Excuse?
Oh, this is going to get crazy. Remy, also from the Philippines, a country where the average citizen believes in the paranormal with much more conviction than the average American, had recently started having very strange and intense dreams involving Teresita, a woman she briefly met but barely knew. Remy had worked at the same hospital as Teresita for a little while, but on different shifts. They'd met at orientation, but didn't stay in touch. There is no way she should have known what she would go on to tell her husband, and then what her husband would tell the police. She'd heard Teresita had been murdered on the news, and a while after that, her dreams began. For a long time, she tried to ignore them. But then one day she had more than a dream. Her husband watched her slip into some sort of trance-like state. She started speaking to him in a voice that was not her own.
Oh my God.
A voice he had never heard before. In this new voice claimed to be Teresita's voice. Through this trance state, Teresita told Joe that she needed his help. She told him that she had been murdered by a man named Alan Showery, A.S., and that she needed him to tell the police the following information.
Oh my God.
Alan had arrived at her apartment to supposedly fix her television. Then, when he showed up, he'd killed her instead. Then, after Teresita's ghost begged him once more to go to the police immediately, her voice faded away. Remy snapped out of her trance, professing no knowledge of what had just happened. When her husband told her, she said that is what she had been dreaming about for weeks. But Joe does not call the police at this time. He and his wife talked themselves into believing she had just been talking in her sleep, that it was all just still dreams. But then a week later, Remy fell into another trance, started speaking to her husband in that same foreign voice, a voice that was now very angry. Teresita's ghost now demanded to know why Joe had not notified the police. Joe told her that he was a doctor, that he was scientifically minded, that he was not going to go to the police without any tangible proof to back up the claim that Alan Showery was Teresita's murderer. At this point, he still thought or hoped this was just another strange episode of his wife talking in her sleep. But then the foreign voice coming out of his wife's mouth told him that Alan Showery had stolen some jewelry from her apartment. Several very unique pieces that her father had purchased in France many years ago and given to her mother. That after stealing the jewelry, Alan had given the jewelry to his girlfriend. Then, this is crazy. Then this voice gave him the names and the phone numbers of 4 different people that Teresita knew that they didn't know, who could identify this jewelry as belonging to Teresita. Then the voice, after urging him again to please contact the authorities, went silent again. His wife snapped out of her trance, claiming like the first time that she had no idea what had just transpired. Joe now finally decided to call the police. It was all too specific. As crazy as it was, he no longer believed that it was just dreams. The detectives listening to all this were, of course, skeptical. But the name Joe gave them did match the initials on the memo Teresita had written to herself, A.S., Alan Showery. And those initials were the most promising evidence they'd taken from her apartment. Perhaps there was something to his claims after all. Even if there weren't, it was the first possible lead of any kind they'd had in months, and they figured it wouldn't hurt to at least look into it. They ran a background check on Alan, and wouldn't you know it, he lived near Teresita and was also employed at Edgewater Hospital in a different department. After speaking with a few of Alan's co-workers, they were shocked to learn that over and over again, each one of them remembered Alan talking about fixing Teresita's TV for her. Holy shit, could he actually be the guy, they wondered.
Oh my God.
Was Teresita's ghost leading them to him? They now decided to pay Alan a visit. They dropped by his apartment unannounced, find both Alan and his girlfriend, Yanka Kamluk, at home. They asked Alan if he'd be willing to go down to the police station with them. They tell him they're investigating the murder of Teresita, and since he'd known her, even if he just barely knew her, they were hoping he could help them solve this case. Alan agrees, thinking there's no way he's their suspect. Speaking down at the station, Alan initially denies ever going into Teresita's apartment. But then when they confront him with the fact that numerous other people had overheard him saying he was going there to fix her television, he changes his story. He now tells them that yes, he had gone to her apartment, he had gone inside, but then he left when he realized he hadn't brought all the right tools. He told them that when he'd left, Teresita was alive and well. He told her he'd be back soon, immediately returned to his own apartment. He then told them that he couldn't return right away to fix Teresita's TV because once he got home, his girlfriend Yanka was having some electrical problems at his place. He needed to figure out what was going on before he did anything else.
That feels weird.
At this point, the detectives put their interview with Alan on pause. They returned to his apartment to speak with his girlfriend. They asked her if she'd asked Alan to fix anything electrical in their apartment, and she had no idea what they were talking about.
Oh, shit.
She said they'd never had electrical problems in their apartment that she knew of. Even if they did, she didn't think Alan could fix them. As far as she knew, he couldn't fix anything electrical, like a TV. He was lying. He was lying about all of it. Following up further on their tips from a fucking ghost, the detectives then asked Yanka if Alan had given her any jewelry recently. Of course he had.
Oh my God.
He'd given her a couple pieces of jewelry back in February, right after Teresita was murdered, telling her they were belated Christmas gifts.
Holy shit.
Then she told him that she was actually wearing them right now. And she pointed out the pendant around her neck, the gold and pearl cocktail ring on her finger. Now they asked Yanka if she could follow them back down to the police station, and she agreed. She had no idea what was going on, no idea she was helping them prove that her boyfriend was a killer. The detectives now arranged to have the people who could supposedly identify the jewelry meet them at the station.
Jesus.
They called the 4 numbers the doctor had given them, the numbers his wife had relayed to him while claiming to be possessed by the ghost of Teresita. They speak with the people her spirit had said would possess those phone numbers. All 4 come down to the station. All of the numbers and names line up.
Unbelievable.
All 4 confirm that Yanka's jewelry had indeed been stolen from Teresita's apartment. Alan was now confronted with all of this evidence against him. He's told where the evidence had come from. He is now as shocked as the detectives. His skin went pale. You could tell he was scared, and he immediately confesses to the murder. He tells them that he decided to rob Teresita because he needed rent money.
Holy shit.
Since she was expecting him to come and fix her television, and apparently had decided she would give him theater tickets to thank him, she let him in the apartment willingly. As she turned around, he attacked her. He told the detectives that he had stripped her clothes off to make it look like it had been a sexual assault, and he told them that he had stabbed her once in the chest. He couldn't find enough money to pay his rent. He was only able to find $30 in cash, so he grabbed the jewelry to make the murder worthwhile. Then he started the fire to cover up his crimes. He admitted to everything. It fit all the evidence they had exactly. None of this was published. He couldn't have known. The detectives that helped bring him into justice would later tell reporters they had no other explanation for finding him outside of a murder victim's ghost telling them who their killer was. They were now firm believers in the paranormal. The doctor's wife, from what they could gather from their investigation, really truly had not known Teresita. There was no way that she should have been able to know what she relayed to her husband, and he definitely didn't know Teresita. It didn't seem that the two had ever met. Alan was arrested, charged with murder. The case went to trial on January 21st, 1979, but ended in a hung jury 4 weeks later.
What?
The jury, for whatever reason, had deadlocked. Then, to add a bit more spook to this story, while in prison awaiting retrial, Alan curiously decided to suddenly plead guilty in exchange for a sentence reduction. He was given 14 years for murder, another 4 for robbery, another 4 for arson. Why would he suddenly confess when he might be able to get another jury to deadlock? The rumor is that he confessed after Teresita's ghost visited him in prison and scared the living shit out of him.
Fuck yeah.
If Alan's still alive, his sentence would have ended years ago. He's now a free man out there somewhere and 75 years old, and I have to wonder, does Teresita's spirit continue to haunt him?
I love Teresita.
Isn't that crazy?
That is insane. I can't wrap my head around.
I can't believe I hadn't heard of this story before.
That's so crazy.
A couple pictures.
Okay.
Before we get into it, this
I had the chills all over.
Oh my God.
It's just
it freaked me out retelling it.
Yeah.
It's such a crazy
How
story.
is it possible?
This first one is Teresita Basa.
Hi, Teresita.
The second one is Alan Showery, her murderer.
Okay.
And then this third one is just one of many headlines. This is a Boston Globe headline, March 8th, 1978. Voice from grave names murderer begs vengeance.
I love it.
How wild is that story?
I love it.
And and there was a bunch of people that knew Teresita, and they had been interviewed. None of them said like, "Oh yeah, this other person, this Filipino lady, I can't remember her name right now. Remy.
I love that name.
Yeah, none of them ever said that. Oh, well, they really knew each other.
That
And they didn't know her.
Yeah.
It was a big hospital. The two of them had worked there. Yes, they had been in an orientation together, but they weren't friends.
Yeah, please.
They weren't even really acquaintances. They just happened to be in an orientation together.
Right, and think about how many new employees are hired at any place, and you're all shoved into one conference room. You get the
Right.
same orientation, then boop, on your way.
And also, it's if she did know her, if she somehow knew all these weird details about Alan, which how the fuck
How
would
would
she know
she know
any of
that?
those?
Unless she was there, unless she helped with it.
Right.
Why wouldn't Alan
He
have...
worked at the same hospital too, but they weren't friends. Nobody said that.
Well, right,
And,
and-
why? And he wouldn't be just around the hospital being like, "Oh yeah, and I did this, and I did this, and here's the 4 people who could identify it, and here's their phone numbers."
Well, and if
what?
Alan would have said "Oh no, Remy did it. She put me up to it." He doesn't sound like he
Right.
ever... I mean, he confessed.
And there was no evidence at all. She was never even on the map of being a suspect at all. I mean, he did it. He for sure did it.
He admitted it.
Yeah, he admitted. He told them all the details. I don't know how that jury was. I mean, who knows? It could have been political stuff. Who knows what it could have been?
Right.
Could have been so many different things. Could have been some procedural error.
Right.
You know.
That when he confessed that
Right.
they hadn't read him
couldn't-
Miranda rights, whatever
Yeah.
it was. There could be so many finite details that
I couldn't find the court transcript. Exactly.
Yeah.
But I found numerous things with these, investigators, and they firmly believe, and that what I told in the story happened. And why would this medical doctor?
I know, of all people.
Yeah, why would he risk his reputation for, and why would his wife, when she clearly didn't have anything to do with the crime, why would she go through all these weird theatrics
Right.
to give details that she could have been just like, "Hey Joe, here's what I know."
Exactly.
It doesn't make any fucking sense other than her ghost came back and possessed somebody
I
and
love
caught
it.
her killer.
I love it so much. It actually...
Bananas.
That story does not scare me at all. It makes me so happy.
But it does open the door, I think,
course it
wider
does.
to every story we've told here.
Listen, Dan, I don't want to let my mind go there. I simply want to say, if I'm ever murdered, I love knowing I can come back and solve my own murder. That's what I
Yeah,
love.
yeah.
That's what I love. I love Teresita. My favorite part of the story was when Joe said that Dr. Joe told
Yeah,
Teresita,
yeah.
nope, I haven't gone to the police. She comes back for a second time. She's so mad at him. And he's like, listen,
Right.
I'm a medical professional. I need more evidence. That
And then just boom, 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 boom.
That is
all the evidence.
That is a particularly interesting conversation to be having with someone.
Oh, yeah.
You're talking to someone beyond the grave.
And it doesn't sound like his wife, it's not like he was like, yeah, my wife does this all the time. So that's why I didn't believe
No.
it. She's always speaking in voices.
I bet it never happened again.
I bet it never happened before, it never happened since.
It is so bizarre.
So bizarre.
Okay, so before you told this story, I was asking you about do you think that people can come back in other forms like that, right? So now I understand. But what's your take on that? Have you ever had an experience where someone else has said to you, I feel like you're talking to me about somebody like I feel like I've known you in a different way. I feel like I've known you for 100 years. Like, does that sort of like deep cosmic connection?
I felt weird, and just about random people I've met over the years. Where I'm like, I know you, but I never met him.
Yeah.
But there's just something I'm like, I knew you somewhere.
Yeah. And sometimes I wonder if that isn't a spirit working through you, like, you know, because I think about. Did you see something?
It was just the way the light reflected on the glasses.
You freaked me out. Yeah, you freaked me out. I think I've talked about this before, but I must just have a familiar face, or there's spirits working through me, because without exaggerating, if I was out like running errands every day of my life, at least once a day, someone would say to me, "Hey, aren't you?" Or "I know you," or like, "Oh, you look just like I don't know if it's the way that I talk or the way I carry myself, or that I'm open to like strangers coming up to me and talking to me. I don't know what it is, but that happens to me. Like when I was working in LA, my job had me out and about a lot, and it would happen to me all the time. "Aren't you?" No, you are. "Nope, I assure you, I'm not your friend's brother or sister's cousin." Like, it was just always so weird. And that story makes me think like, is it something else? Is it... because I talk about being an empath and being spongy and picking things up and feeling all the things, am I picking up little pieces of spirits as I go?
I know. When I first saw you, I thought I was like, I know that sexy little butt. No?
You did? Whose butt did you think it was? You're like, I've seen that ass before.
J-Lo.
Well done, Joe. I will take it. I will take it. Also, kind of weird that you said that.
Well, hey.
It made me think about, you know, your stepsister, who's like one of my best friends, Emily. She lost her brothers and her dad in a really awful, tragic accident. And we've had these conversations where she shares some stuff with me about her brothers, and it just feels like in moments like I'm channeling them. Like, it's just weird. So bizarre, some of the things that she'll say, and it like rocks us both to tears of like, you know, a horrible thing happened in her life, and like nearly impossible to find silver lining in it. But our friendship is something that has come out of it in the long term, and we've just had these like cries about it of like, oh my God.
Yeah, you guys have an interesting relationship.
Yeah, it's so intense. It's really cool.
Before you tell your stories,
yes,
I want to acknowledge my nephew, Emerson Hale. Thanks, Em.
Our number one fan.
Yeah.
He'll forever...
He is.
Sorry, guys. No one can beat him. He's our family.
He has given me a new squishy.
It's
when he was on
hysterical.
vacation. He found in a little curiosity gift shop, a little, you know, replica of a shrunken head.
So it's a real shrunken head.
Real. So I have my real squishy head, shrunken squishy head.
You'll never be a shrunken head.
I would be the worst shrunken head. They'd be like, it's still pretty big. It'd be like, this is a shrunken head. Like, that looks like a normal size head. Yeah, but if you just saw the head earlier, you'd know that now it's been shrunken.
It's so funny because you wouldn't look at you and know that you have a big head.
Right.
You don't look disproportionate. When Monroe also has a big head that she's like figuring that out as she tries to wear hats. She's
Funny.
like, what the fuck?
Sorry, Momo.
That's awesome. But it doesn't look weird. It's just when you try to put a baseball hat on. All right. Are you... I'm afraid I'm going to knock that. Are you ready, spaghetti?
I'm ready.
Okay. So we're off to Colombia, as I mentioned before, for this like very bizarre story from our fan Oscar down there, who like, I'm so excited to tell his story. We were emailing yesterday, and he was just saying that it's been a rough year, which it has been for so many people, and this was something that really brought him some joy. So I'm really happy to be able to give this to him to share his story. It's twisty. It's twisty-turny.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear it.
I want you to be thinking about, as I tell this story, if it's about Oscar's dad, and if this was your dad, like, what the fuck would you do?
Okay.
Because your dad has a very colored history, and I can actually see your dad ending up in some of these scenarios.
Okay.
So great. All right. So the story begins. This took place a few years ago, and while these events do not currently affect me, I still found them to be deeply upsetting, and I'm hoping you guys will help me make sense of this entire situation. I emigrated to the United States when I was a young boy. However, my father, along with most of my family, remained in Colombia. Naturally, I grew up in a very different environment than most of my family, and although I regularly attended CCD classes, which is like catechism, and would go to church on Sundays, I found myself growing into quite the bit of skeptic when it came to religion. This was a strong contrast with my family in South America, who are deeply Catholic, believing not only in forces of good, but in the forces of evil as well. While in college, I learned that my father was going through an ugly divorce. He asked if I would move in with him for the time being, and I immediately jumped at the chance to help him. I put my life on hold and quickly flew to be with him. I soon noticed he was struggling not only emotionally, but financially as well. As far as I was concerned, up until recently, I thought he'd had a strong business and a happy marriage. However, this was no longer the case. He was always surrounded by a lot of people, and these people were very, very nice. A little too nice, in my opinion, and it always made me feel uncomfortable. I didn't give it much thought at the time, as I was just happy he wasn't alone. I soon came to know these people as they were a part of a prayer group my father had created that met twice a week. I was invited into a session, and this is where I found out that not only did they pray, but they performed some types of exorcisms on people that felt they needed it. I didn't want to judge, but if I'm honest, I found it all to be a bit funny. I thought it was all a big act by the person claiming to be possessed. Naturally feeling a strong sense of curiosity, I decided to witness one of these so-called exorcisms. It was a woman who quickly started yelling obscenities when the praying began. She would contort her body into strange poses, proceeded to roll around on the floor for what seemed like 10 minutes. And at some point she stopped, and everyone claimed she was cured. This was further confirmed, at least everyone thought it was, when she knelt by the statue of the Virgin Mary and began caressing it. The relief in the room was soon interrupted by her devious laughter. I glanced at this woman and noticed she was not touching the Virgin Mary, but rather the snake that was at her feet. If you have seen the Virgin Mary, seen depictions of the Virgin Mary, she's often pictured standing on top of a snake. This is supposedly to signify the Virgin Mary's dominance over Satan, the very Satan depicted by the snake, which this woman was now kissing and caressing. Everyone in the room began to pray once again, and she began to roll around again, yelling, seemingly in a lot of pain. By now, I thought to myself, this is such nonsense. As soon as this thought rose up in my mind, this woman looked at me and yelled, "Doubter! Doubter! Doubter!" I especially was startled because no one spoke English other than myself. I tried to make sense of it, and I decided that the conclusion was that she must have known a few words in English and had heard I grew up in the States, and I went home and tried to put the entire night behind me. A few weeks later, the prayer group met at our house. We were asked to form a circle and close our eyes, and everyone began to pray. Some prayed in Spanish, while others prayed in tongues. After a few minutes, I opened my eyes and noticed a few people had their right hands pointing toward the middle of the circle, their index finger extended, performing a circular clockwise motion while simultaneously sticking out their tongues, spinning it in a counterclockwise direction.
What?
This unsettled me, and for the first time I felt scared and wanted to leave the room. But I knew this would upset them, so I closed my eyes, hoping it would all be over soon. Little by little, I began to notice the people in this prayer group did not practice what they preached. While I would not go as far to say they were bad people, I did find them to not be nearly as virtuous in comparison to how much time they spent praying. I decided to distance myself from the group and focus on work and my relationship instead. I was working managing my father's company. It was a large facility that included not only the factory and the offices, but a chapel and an apartment. I had settled into the apartment, which was located directly underneath the chapel where most of these exorcisms were performed. My girlfriend at the time had spent the night with me, and we began hearing noises from the chapel located above my room. My girlfriend began to point out to me how strange this all was, that my dad's life was full of misfortune, and that the cause could be the exorcisms they performed. Exorcisms were not sanctioned by the church, I might add, at least not these ones. She insisted that the chapel and the apartment were unusually cold, and she felt something was very seriously wrong. One night, I had finished working late and was walking the short distance to my apartment when I saw the shadow of a man. It seemed as if it was being reflected from the outside through the window, but this was impossible since this was on the 4th floor. There was no way someone's shadow could have been projected there. I began to listen to what my girlfriend had said and considered all that what she was saying was making sense. Coincidentally, the activity began to escalate from here. We began to hear new noises at night. It was as if someone was moving chairs around in the chapel. Although they were not moved in a violent manner, it sounded as if someone was trying to get our attention. These noises escalated into footsteps walking around on top of my room for most of the night, and the doorknob being turned and the door swinging wide open in front of my girlfriend one night while she was alone. I told a few people I could trust about it and learned no one had been able to last more than a month in this apartment. We could not tolerate it any longer and made the decision to move into an apartment away from the company. A few months passed when I found out my father was dating a woman from his past. When I told my mother, she told me to be careful with this woman as she had tried to get in between them 20 years earlier and was somehow involved in witchcraft. Not believing any of it, I inquired further and was told my mother would get threatening phone calls from this other woman, that she started feeling as if someone was watching her at night. She described how my grandmother had given her a metal crucifix, claiming it would protect her, a crucifix that somehow snapped in half while it was hanging in the rearview mirror of my mother's car. I naturally found all of this to be a bit hard to believe. A few days later, my father got into a fight about who knows what with his new girlfriend's family. And the next thing you know, he gets a call from a man claiming to be a shaman, chanting in a strange language. This did make me wonder if my mom's story wasn't so far-fetched. I noticed a change in my father. He suddenly became impossible to work for. He was always upset with me and would change his mind often and usually for no reason. Even though I had been able to make great progress in my time at the company, our arguments and disagreements became too great and I was fired. He seemed to have a new and deep hatred for me that I could not explain. He forbid me from entering the premises and refused to pay me my salary, all in an effort to cause as much damage as possible to my life. I couldn't explain nor understand this behavior from the person who had once loved me the most and for whom I had given up my life in the States. I decided it was time to come back home. My new wife and I moved into my mother's apartment in America while we sold all of our belongings. One night, while cooking, I began to feel like I was being watched. I felt a knock at the main door and I went to see who it was. I was surprised when I opened the door and didn't see anyone. I continued cooking, but began to get that feeling again, that someone was watching me. I felt a sense of dread like I had never felt before. I quickly finished and went to lie in bed with my wife. That night, I woke and was instantly very afraid. I knew someone was in the room with us. I noticed one of the corners of the room was darker than all the rest. Once my eyes had adjusted, I had barely just enough time to make out a shadow of a woman with long hair before she jumped on top of me. I could feel her hands and long fingernails around my neck. Instinctively, I reached and put my hands around her neck, which caused me to wake up. I woke up to the sight of my hands around my own wife's neck. She was on top of me, trying to calm me down after I had been struggling and choking for minutes in my sleep. I told her what had happened, and as soon as I convinced myself it had been a nightmare, we both felt a loud knock as the bedroom window vibrated, followed by a loud and menacing laugh. This was unsettling for a few reasons. One was the laugh. It was demonic and evil, almost like it was mocking us. And two, impossibly the scariest reason, was that we were on the 9th floor of the building with no balconies. We could not sleep for the rest of the night. Speaking to my mother the next morning, she confessed she had been keeping something from us. She had been receiving calls from an unknown number, threatening her and telling her to get her son out of the country or something else would happen to him. When we returned to the States, I felt a rush of relief come over me. We had recently tried to connect with my father as he is no longer involved with that woman. We can't help but shake the strong negativity we feel whenever we are around him. Whenever we are near him, we either have something stolen or my wife and I get into fights, which is really unlike us. This negativity happens often enough that we noticed a pattern, which coincided with whenever we spoke or interacted with my dad. We therefore decided to keep our distance and put all of this behind us. Oscar.
That's crazy, Oscar.
Like, is his dad some sort of weird beacon?
Or his dad was...
Just two lost young people. So could you please open the door and let us in?
Oh, that's the little doll you have. Oh my God, that's the little black...
But where is it? I threw them both at you. They're on the floor by you.
Oh, yeah, they're over here. Oh, I think I stepped on one.
Oh, my sweet
God.
baby Jesus.
Sorry, if you couldn't hear, if you just got quiet in your end.
Oh my God.
Lindsay threw these little dolls. I forgot that they had little voice boxes, and I swear I wasn't doing that on purpose. I was just moving around in my chair, and I must...
Please let
Yep.
us in.
And that's what we just heard.
Young people. So could you please open the door and let us in?
Oh, we just scared the shit out of ourselves.
Oh my God, because I was like, I was about to say, there's no way it could just go off because you have to squeeze it, but you touched it with your foot?
I touched it with my foot.
For sure.
I had my foot on-
100%.
100%.
You felt something squishy on the floor and you pushed it.
I think. It was by my foot when I looked down there. It was by my foot when I looked down there. I didn't do it on purpose for sure because I forgot those things. But because that scared, I was about to get out of the room. I was like, what is happening? Back to Oscar.
Holy smokes.
I wish I did that intentionally. Back to Oscar. That is such a wild story where, okay, just following it, like if this is a movie I'm watching, it's like, okay, that is a cult of some kind.
Yes.
They are not into, the good side of Christianity. They're in the dark side.
Agreed.
They're invoking things, not trying to exercise things. They're bringing things. They brought something into like black magic type weird shit. They brought something into that little chapel by the apartment. Some kind of entity that was, terrorizing them, and they did something to his dad, and then did something to him too to get him to be away from his dad. And then if his dad still has that weird energy around him, even though he's no longer with that weird like witchcraft lady, she did something to his spirit, where there's something attached to him or something.
Where he's being isolated.
Ugh.
Like he's
that was a creepy story.
He's being isolated, in my opinion, because it's like if he is alone, the things can get to him. A lot of times in these stories, it's just like no one could get close to them. They couldn't love anybody. They, everything in their life falls apart.
This episode is scarier than I thought it was going to be.
I know it's very psychologically thrilling. Yeah. Very, very, very creepy.
Yeah, that one gave me goosebumps numerous times.
Okay, well, you're going to dig this next one.
Okay.
I love this story because it has a little bit of levity to it.
Yeah.
But the twist at the end is, I think it's going to get you just based on the totality of this episode. You're going to be like, what the fuck?
Okay.
Okay. So you're going to think that we're having a sleep paralysis story. Okay. And maybe, or in my opinion, definitely not.
Okay.
Okay. Now, on the note of sleep paralysis, I just want to tell you that some weird stuff has been happening to me. Remember how I've been saying, like, I had just, like, 2 experiences, and I mentioned one recently where I just, like, woke up and, like, you were at work, still, you were at the studio late with the dogs.
Yeah.
The last couple of nights, it happened to me when we were at your grandma's, and I don't know if it was self-induced because we slept at Grandma Betty's house, and you have told the story about how your Grandma Stell
talked about people visiting her in that room that we slept in.
Yes, and so it was really hard.
I was thinking of it, but I was like, no way I'm bringing that up to Lindsay.
Oh, I was thinking the same thing, and I was like, he'll be so annoyed if I bring it up, because then he'll be like, okay, great, now I'm not going to sleep. Like, I know the whole routine, that you'll be so angry.
Okay.
Not angry, frustrated. And you'll be a butthead, and you won't snuggle me, and you won't stay up as late as I want you to.
Jeez.
So that's part of the reason I didn't sleep all weekend at your grandma's.
Oh, okay.
Okay. But also, this is so weird, babe. But when I was going to sleep the one night, I swore I heard like a word spoken, like a woman's voice. I thought it said Jenny, but I was like, Lindsay, you're hearing things. We were
Don't touch my grandson's penis.
Stop it.
Okay.
But I was thinking like, okay, we're sleeping with the window open. We're in a place that I have never slept before.
Yeah.
It was rodeo weekend, so people were out late. So I actually could have heard someone say Jenny, but
yes, true. Because there was rodeo weekend. There was like parties,
right,
quote unquote downtown. But at the bar that was, you could hear what was going on from my grandma's house.
Exactly. So I was like, okay, I justified it that way. But then last night, going to bed,
not by the rodeo.
We're back home. Our room is, I would say, pretty like soundproof. Like lots of sounds don't seep in or out. And we were going to sleep, and I was so sure that I heard whispering, like so much so that my heart sank to my stomach.
Whoa.
But then I was having a moment, I'm like, am I asleep? Am I awake? Like, what is happening? Like, I thought I was just going to sleep, but like, was I in like that weird in-between phase?
Did you hear, now you can touch my grandson's penis?
Stop! I'm trying to tell you something serious.
Okay, no, listen, come on. I got it out of my system. Come on, that's a pretty good one.
No, it's not. It's dumb. And I'm trying to tell you, like, these scary things are happening to me on our scary
I know. I'm trying to lighten it up.
You're trying to lighten up because you're fucking scared, and this is what you do.
I don't want you to get too scared.
I'm fine. I'm telling you, like, some weird shit that's happening.
But you didn't.
But you don't want to be scared. You're so ridiculous.
No, probably.
Yeah, you're the. Oh man, I could fucking psychoanalyze you right now so hard.
Did you? Did you hear the whispering saying it? But you couldn't make it out.
I couldn't make it out, but it was just bizarre.
Ugh.
I know.
Well, hopefully you don't hear it again.
But I fucking hope not. If you do not bring those dolls home and do not play a trick on me, I will kill you.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyways, this story like had me flashing as I was refreshing myself this morning before recording this. I was like, oh, yeah, like this is interesting timing. Okay. Hey, Dan and Lindsay. I've only just started watching your podcast. My daughter's best friend suggested it, and now I'm binging the podcast. I love that. So cute. I watched a few that touched on the subject of sleep paralysis, a subject I know well. I've been dealing with sleep paralysis since my early teens. Sleep paralysis is not a paranormal thing, of course, but I feel if it's coupled with being sensitive, things get a little bit murky. I'm not a writer, so I'm not going to embellish here, just straight to the facts. Also, I don't want to share names or locations. We live in a small town and I just don't need the drama. This is a true story. At 15, my family and I were living in a small town in southern Indiana, which, by the way, we get a lot of stories from Indiana. Like, what the fuck is going on over there? The town where my parents grew up.
Where Logan's creepy ass came from.
Exactly. I hear him laughing. It's a very old town prone to flooding from the Ohio, and everyone knows everybody. Pretty typical small town. We lived next door to a single father of 2 boys, ages 11 and 12. The dad had gotten a job paying big money, but it was a 2-hour commute, and he needed a babysitter. His shift started at 5 a.m., and that would mean I would have to walk over to their house at about 2:30 a.m. I would go over to my neighbor's house, crash on the couch until the sons woke up, make breakfast, and spend the day biking, fishing, and playing basketball. Good times. I admit I was a little nervous of the house. I just assumed it was because I was the only person awake and it was still dark outside. That kind of uneasiness that happens when you're a teen home alone. No biggie. Then one morning, something happened. I went over as usual. The dad was rushing around looking for his keys, making sure he had his wallet. It's the usual show. All the things working dads do as they leave for work. I'd seen my dad do it, and years later would see my husband do it. Briefcase, lunchbox, keys, wallet, and he's off to work. I sat on the couch and switched on the TV. We didn't have cable at our house, so of course this was a perk. It was the 80s, and MTV hadn't gone to total shit yet.
Yes.
I grabbed a drink and some chips and chilled. When I finally got sleepy, I grabbed a blanket and a pillow and settled onto the couch while watching TV.
Oh, that sounds so good.
I was awakened by the sound of something moving around in the loft that was above the living room. It was a very open area with hardwood floors and a wide staircase that led to the main hall. It sounded like a man up there. My first thought was that the dad had forgotten something and had come back home. The TV had been turned off and the light in the loft was on. I could see the light on the stairs and wall. I could hear him moving about. He seemed upset, like he was distressed or desperate to find something. I tried to call out to him, but I had no voice. I couldn't move. I couldn't turn my head. Something was holding me down, something I couldn't see. The position I was laying in allowed me to see the man's shadow on the wall. It was like watching a movie, just with silhouettes. He was searching in boxes, upset and sobbing a bit. He became more and more agitated. Now he was throwing the boxes and cursing. This was definitely not the dad. I don't know who he was. I'm freaking out and all I can do is lay there and watch. I keep praying the kids don't wake up. I'm so afraid he will find us. Then he kind of just slumps down. He sits down on the stairs, sobbing with his head in his hands, total sadness, completely giving up. He then pulls out a gun and shoots himself in the head. The shot is so loud. There is debris on the wall where I see his shadow slumped over. Oh, fuck. I wake up like I'm coming out of cold water, deep breaths, and I sit up. It's morning. The boys are watching TV and eating cereal, and everything is normal. I asked the boys if I was moving around or thrashing in my sleep, but they said no. I didn't tell them about the dream or about how I couldn't move or wake. It was just a bad dream, right? No need to scare the boys. We went about our day. With the dream in the back of my mind all day, I was now very scared of their house, not just nervous. I wouldn't sleep there anymore. Whatever had happened had felt like an attack. I was young and didn't know what I had experienced, and I didn't want to tell anyone. Summer moved on, and the boys went back to their mother's house for the school year. They would only be at their dad's on the weekends, so I was no longer needed. Cool. Years passed. I grew up, met my husband, and we had our own children. We moved back to my small town with my very own family. Eventually, I would tell my husband about sometimes feeling like I'm being held down in my sleep. He told me to ask my doctor about it because it sounded like sleep paralysis. I did talk with my doctor who confirmed it. I was relieved that it wasn't paranormal, over and done with. Or so I thought. We were celebrating my 25th birthday and Halloween. We'd had a bonfire in the backyard. Good food, good wine, good music. And when who should walk up? The two boys I used to babysit for. They are young men now. We were all sitting around the fire on Halloween night, and of course, the subject of ghost stories comes up. Everyone is taking turns telling their stories. Eventually, it gets around the circle to the eldest of the two boys that I babysat for. He says, "We lived in a haunted house." I was confused. I hadn't seen the boys in years, and I wasn't really sure where they lived in all that time. I knew their dad had moved closer to his job, so he didn't have to commute. They were older now. Did they have their own place? I just had to ask. Really? Where was that? He looked at me funny and says, "You know, the house where you used to babysit us." I'm a little stunned by this. Huh? He frowned and says, "Yeah, the house was haunted. Some guy committed suicide on the stairs." That was it. It was a big oh fuck moment for me. That is exactly what I was shown on the wall that night. A suicide.
Yikes.
Isn't that interesting?
That's so interesting. If they had never heard that story before and then had that moment and then years later hear that from the boy, I mean, if I'm that person, it's like that's your moment of like, welp, definitely paranormal.
Right? Not sleep paralysis.
Nope.
Or can it be a combination of the two?
Yeah, I guess there's no rule that it can't be both.
Right? Is it sleep paralysis to show something? Like, was that spirit looking for some sort of recognition of what had happened or some sort of closure? Like, why would it choose? Why did she need to see that or he see that? I don't know. The author is.
I don't know.
Oh, they said husband. I don't know. The author is anonymous. But yeah, it's like. Sorry, I just made the assumption that it was a woman because it said husband, and that's not fair, right? Sorry about that.
Yeah, it could be whoever, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, they just don't know. Like what? And so specific. Like the author says, like the person who committed suicide sat down on the top of the stairs and committed suicide. And they were saying that when they were in that sleep paralysis moment, all they could see was the light on the wall and on the staircase. Like they call it all out. That's nuts.
That was a good quick one.
Just enough to get you.
Nice little ending. Yeah, yikes. Good stuff today.
I know, man. Today was intense.
Do you have some Annabelles you would like to thank, or do you want me to thank mine first?
Oh, I'm happy to go first, Dan.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, they are ours.
Yeah.
They are ours. The English language is so stupid sometimes. Let's say that. I would like to thank the Annabelles who continue to support the show and let us do what we do. Courtney Carmen, Shauna Negus, Aaron Biddle, Aaron, no last name, Sarah Smith, Mahala, Amanda Norton, Allie Klein, Cynthia Stanford, Angela Knapp, Morgan Whitehouse, Cody Patrick, Spencer, no last name given, Kenneth Scott, and Hope, no last name given.
Nice. I would like to thank the following Annabelles. Bridget Prada Sanchez. Bridget, can I put a little flair in your name just for a second? Because it makes me, I just like the Spanish language. Bridget Prada Sanchez. Para Sanchez. That's how I did it.
The thing is that her name is...
I know, it's Para Sanchez.
Well, it's hyphenated. So
so the first part might not be Spanish. Dang it. In another life, I want to be like a matador.
Okay. Will you be
If I could go back in time.
Be my spicy lover?
I get to wear like a fancy outfit.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not. You know what? I'm gonna change that. I want to be a musician. I want to play Spanish guitar because I thought about the cool, like people love them, but then I'm like, yeah, they love them because they risk their lives with the bulls. I don't want that part.
Okay.
I want to be a handsome Spaniard.
Okay. Are you also gonna be able to like move your hips like they do?
Yep.
Great.
I can't in this life.
I'm in.
But
that was just a little bit too much information.
I want to thank Josh Hudson Pillar.
Okay, I gave you so many hard names this week. This is going to be so fun.
I have no idea where that name comes from. Kim Yeager, Neil Dauphiny, James Kane, Isaac Mueller, Jose Pantoja, Ryan Friel, Tyler Reppert, Brianna Crease, Kirsten Bombard, Cheyenne Favre, Lane Albee, George Chall JF, and Lena Leweski. I almost said Lejewski, but it's JWE. Lena, that's Lena. I have seen a lot of Polish names, but yours is that the correct spell? Lijweski. It's a ski.
Wait, spell it again.
Lij, but then instead of EW, WE S-K-I.
And I checked the spelling because
It's probably some Polish, like in the Polish alphabet, it probably like, I'm sure it makes a certain sound.
it's probably Leweski.
Leweski.
I bet the J is
nice.
silent.
But the J is silent.
And you said Lana?
Lana.
Could be Lana, could be Lana.
Lana or Lana Leweski.
I bet it's Leweski.
I bet it's Leweski. Leweski sounds better. Well, apologies if it is Lejewiski or something. But you never know with Polish.
Lejuski.
You did the most Polish thing ever. Can I rat you out for a second? Our daughter was making fun of Lindsay for being Polish. And because she just did Ancestry.com and she was really pumped
Monroe
up.
did. Monroe did it.
Really pumped up that she's Scottish for some reason. This big like Scottish ancestry component.
She's so stoked about it.
And then there's other, Irish and there's other stuff. And then she was like teasing Lindsay for being like, mostly Polish, like almost all Polish.
Because I was like, oh, that's so cool. You're so excited. She's like, yeah. And I think she said, at least I'm not Polish.
Yeah, something about, making this joke like he's not Polish. And then so Lindsay goes to post on Instagram about like, oh, Monroe posted like this thing about me being Polish. Everyone's in on the joke. And then she posted a picture that had nothing to do with the part.
Well, it was a screenshot and I didn't realize that it cropped out
And you
the
didn't
part
check
that I
it.
needed. Nope, sure did.
It was the most Polish thing ever. So she did a picture like, hey, check out this evidence of my stepdaughter making fun of me for being Polish. And then you look at the post and it doesn't even mention anything about being Polish.
That's a carryover from Time Suck. Dan likes to rip on me over there. So if you don't know that joke, sorry.
Fun. And that's all I got today.
Okay, well, I
You
have
got some spoopy shout outs.
I do, Dan. I do. Thank you for acknowledging that. Okay, this first shout out, I am very excited about it. It has a little bit of information with it. So this shout out goes to Debbie from your snot-nosed brats, Leroy, Dylan, Corey, and Abby. Congrats on your new degree and good luck on your master's, Mom. We're so proud of you. This is so fucking
awesome.
cool. Their mom went back to school to be a social worker and
Yeah.
she's graduating at 51.
Nice.
And then going back for her master's.
Good for her.
Isn't that fucking awesome? I love it. And then we have to Sassy from your mom, Brandy. Happy 21st birthday. To Annabelle from Brogan. Love you. To Brittany from Frankie. Also love you. And to Michael from Ivy, Lily, Paisley, and Alyssa. Happy 13th birthday.
Nice.
A young creeper peeper.
Oh, happy birthday. And that is all for today. Thank you for continuing to send in your personal tales of terror to my story at scaredtodeathpodcast.com and for emailing us for everything else at info@scaredtodeathpodcast.com. Thanks to Logan Keith on social media and badmagicmerch.com merch design. Check out that summer wear. Store at badmagicproductions.com for customer service. Thanks to producer Sophie Evans for help with story curation, Joe Paisley producing and directing, Zach Cohen for custom soundbed creation, and Heather Rylander for organizing the My Story emails. Subscribe to Bad Magic Productions on YouTube if you want to watch the shows. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more content at Scared to Death Podcast, where we post the pictures associated with the episodes. And we have a private Facebook group, Creeps and Peepers, moderated by Liz Hernandez. Thank you, Liz. If you don't want to hear more ads, if you want monthly bonus episodes and more, check out our Patreon and become a Robert or an Annabelle. And enjoy your nightmares, Creeps and Peepers. Maybe something is on the other side. Hope you were scared to death.
If spirits threaten me in this place, fight water by water and fire by fire. Banish their souls into nothingness and remove their powers until the last trace. Let these evil beings flee through time and space. Evil may pass through,